Hello and welcome to this week's breakdown video where we will be taking a deep dive from a betting perspective into all of the main card fights taking place this weekend at UFC Fight Night Reyes versus Prochazka. Hopefully you'll be able to use the information in this video to make better betting decisions, put together better DraftKings lineups and hopefully earn some extra cash. And speaking of extra cash, big shout out to Thug Rose, big shout out to Rose Namajunas who came through for all of us in a very big way last week. She did pretty much what we expected her to do, use her superior technique to exploit Weili Zhang's poor striking defense. Zhang just didn't see that head kick come in, and hopefully you were able to use the advice from last week's video to make a little bit of extra cash on Thug Rose, and hopefully we could do it again this week. Fingers crossed you'll be able to use the information in this video to earn some extra cash on Saturday night. Speaking of extra cash, there are still a couple of spaces available for live betting this week. I'm very profitable at live betting. Check out the results page on my website. You will love live betting with us. So if you'd like to take advantage of that, there's a couple of spaces available. They'll probably sell out very quickly. So head on over to my website. Link in the description below. All you need to do is go to the homepage, MMABettingTips.com. Roll the mouse over betting tips. Go to live betting tips. And from there, you'll be able to sign up. And trust me, you will like it a lot. Also, it's that time of the video where we need to do a business deal. If this video gets 200 likes, I will do a prop bet live stream this Saturday night before UFC Fight Night Reyes versus Prochazka starts. So hit the like button below. The last two events we haven't hit the like target, which is kind of crazy to me because these videos get a pretty good amount of views, but a lot of you that are watching are not hitting the like button. I'm only asking for 200 likes. This video is going to get over 2,000 views. That's less than 10% of you watching need to hit that like button. You hit the like button, we do the live stream. A lot more people than 200 people watch those prop bet live streams, so please hit the like button below. We'll get that prop stream rolling on Saturday. And if you don't know what a prop bet is, let me just help you out. A prop bet is just basically a highly specific bet on an MMA fight or any other sport for that matter, where you're usually betting on method of victory. So for example, if we were to bet on Jiri Prochazka to win by knockout or TKO at 2.0, that would be considered a prop bet. And in the prop bet live streams that I like to do every week, I basically dig through all of the fights on the UFC card for that week, and I try and find a decent value prop bet for you guys on each of the fights. And you know, I've been tracking the results on these props for 2 years now, or over 2 years now, and they are profitable. So if you want that prop bet live stream, hit the goddamn like button. Jesus Christ, it's not difficult. And with that, let's get into the first fight that I want to talk about this week, which is going to be Poliana Botelho against Luana Carolina. Now, this fight card this week is a very interesting one. It's a tricky one for betting because a lot of the fighters this week, or a lot of the fights this week, feature very heavy favourites. You look at like Dvalishvili, Michailidis, Lukbunmei, Gabriel Benitez, Poliana Botelho, Sean Strickland. They're all very big favourites, and not necessarily usually the kind of fighter that you would trust betting at those big favourite odds. So we're obviously going to be talking a lot about these big favourites in this video, so some of these breakdowns may become a little bit repetitive. I do apologise, but like with all forms of gambling, you can only play the hand you're dealt, and a lot of the matchups we're going to be talking about here are going to be relatively tricky from a betting point of view. So let's look at this from a betting point of view. So Poliana Botelho against Luana Carolina. Let's take a look at the odds on this matchup. So we've currently got Poliana Botelho as one of the biggest favourites on the card. She's currently around about an average of, I would say, 1.41, which is minus 244 for an implied probability of 71%. And if we take a look at the odds on Luana Carolina, quite a big odds spread here, anywhere from 2.75 up to about 3.30. So we will say average odds of about 3.0. which is plus 200 for an implied probability of 73%. So when we look at the odds on this fight, the bookies are very much 70-30 in favour of Botelho, which is interesting because, and again, this is going to be one of those cards where you will kind of hear me say a lot of the same stuff, But remember, we're always talking about these fights from a betting point of view. And what I would say is, in order for me to bet a fighter in the odds range that we see Botelho in, they need to have no significant weaknesses. Because if we look at what the implied probability is in her odds of 1.41, you know, an implied probability of 71% means you kind of have to cap her at 75% or better to be getting a good deal on the odds here. And it's very, very difficult to bet a fighter, or it's very, very difficult to feel that confident in a fighter like Poliana Botelho that has so many weaknesses. The issue with this matchup is that I don't think Carolina has the skills to exploit those weaknesses, but at the end of the day, those glaring weaknesses are still there. So let's talk about how these girls match up from a stylistic point of view, and you can maybe start to understand the problem I'm having with betting this matchup. So in terms of the tail of the tape, Botelho, 32 years old, 5'8" with a 67-inch reach. Luana Carolina, 27 years old, 5'6" with a 69-inch reach. So both these girls have got abnormally long reaches for the division, but neither of them are particularly good at using it. That's predominantly because both girls have, for the most part, got a kicks-based style of striking. Neither of these girls are particularly good boxers, and because of that, they don't do a particularly good job of using their reach. Poliana Botelho also trains at Nova União under one of the best MMA coaches to ever do it, Andre Pederneiras, the guy that helped Jose Aldo, Reynan Barão, Junior Dos Santos, Claudia Gadeja, all these super ultra talented fighters that have come out of Rio de Janeiro. You know, a lot of them owe their success to Andre Pederneiras. Also trained BJ Penn for a long time. So you can see the fact that Poliana Botelho is training under Pederneiras is a very, very positive thing. Luana Carolina trains at a small regional gym, which is actually a Nova União affiliate, but it's not the main Nova União gym. So, you know, if we're looking at the rate at which these girls are going to be improving, more likely Botelho is going to be improving at a higher rate than Carolina, because iron sharpens iron. She's going to be getting, you know, better working with better training partners at the gym she trains at with overall better coaches. So, you know, the likelihood is Botelho will be improving faster than Carolina, and it's important to talk about that because both girls are pretty young. You know, Botelho is just hitting her prime at 32 years old. Carolina's still got a lot of room for improvement at 27, but may not necessarily be training at the best gym to get those improvements in. So how do these girls match up from a stylistic point of view? Well, they both have a base in Muay Thai. They both favour kicks as opposed to punches, and that really shows both offensively and defensively. I would say that you'll very rarely actually see Botelho throw punches. One of her best weapons is her body kick. She actually folded Suri Kondo with a body kick. And she also hurt Laura Mueller quite bad with one as well. In fact, she also hurt Cynthia Calvillo with a body kick. This girl's body kicks are pretty nasty. And that is quite significant because if you go back and watch Luana Carolina's last fight against Ariane Lipski, you can see that she did get dropped off a shot to the body, just a hook to the body, which is a huge red flag because Poliana Botelho's body kicks inflict a hell of a lot more damage than, you know, a hook to the body. Her body kicks are absolutely vicious, but both these girls have a very, very kicks-based style of striking. What I could tell you about their boxing is that Botelho doesn't really throw many punches, much more of a single-shot puncher, single-shot boxer. She likes to do all her work with the kicks. Carolina will throw a lot of punches, but she's painfully inaccurate. Carolina has this style of striking where she just likes to circle on the outside, circle away from her opponent, you know, stay very, very light on her feet, chip away at them with kicks from the outside, and then every once in a while she'll blitz forward in a straight line and just throw these wide looping hooks. No accuracy, no real thought into what she's doing. She just kind of closes her eyes and flails her arms around and hope that something lands. It does make her painfully inaccurate, and it also makes her super vulnerable to counters when she does come in, because when she comes forward in a straight line and blitzes her opponent, she's not aware of distance or range. She almost is so clumsy with it that she runs into her opponent, and her arms are kind of flailing around all over the place with very, very poor technique. Against a very good counter striker, Karolina is the kind of fighter that is at significant risk of being knocked out because she rushes forward in straight lines with her chin up high and exposed, not reacting to anything that her opponent does. You know, she's not thinking about what shots might be coming back in her direction, how she kind of, you know, may need to move her head and evade those counter strikes. But fortunately for her, Botelho isn't a counter striker, so it probably isn't going to matter. Karolina has huge weaknesses when it comes to striking, but I'm not sure, aside from the body kicks that Karolina may be susceptible to because she got dropped off a body shot against Lipski. Aside from that, I don't see Botelho as really having a particularly well-equipped skill set to exploit Karolina's weaknesses standing. Now, if this fight stays standing, there's no doubt that Botelho will be the more technically skilled striker, but I do think this fight could look very ugly if it stays standing, because Luana Karolina has got one of these really awkward styles where she's going to make a lot of more technically superior fighters look very bad. I'm going to compare her a little bit to John Dodson. She's nowhere near John Dodson's level. She's very, very low level from a technical point of view, but she does have Dodson's style in a way, because she kind of just circles, circles on the outside, looks to avoid engaging. She's got a really good gas tank, which means she can utilize a lot of footwork and a lot of movement to just circle away for 3 rounds and make it very, very difficult for her opponent to get to her. And then every once in a while she'll blitz forward, you know, with those blitzing attacks we mentioned earlier to try and score some points. Now, I do think that style can give Polyana some trouble, primarily because Polyana is a lot more heavy set, a lot more flat-footed. She's got that more traditional Muay Thai style where she likes to stand in front, you know, in the middle of the octagon and exchange with girls who will stand, you know, right in front of her, also in that kickboxing range. Botelho doesn't look like someone that's going to be particularly good at cutting the cage off, or, you know, following her opponent around the cage and making it a small place to be with footwork. I think Karolina's footwork, no matter how clumsy and low level it is, just by not engaging with Botelho, I think that could cause Botelho some trouble. And I think when it comes to striking, this fight is really going to depend on how much success both girls have in those moments where Karolina blitzes forward. And what I mean by that is, you know, Botelho's going to want to fight Karolina in the middle of the octagon in kickboxing range. Karolina's not going to play that game. She's going to be on her bike circling away looking to counter-strike. So Botelho's opportunities to score points are going to be, you know, the same times that Karolina's going to have an opportunity to score points is when Karolina's going to blitz forward in those straight lines. And the girl that's going to win this, or win the striking exchange in this fight, is going to be the girl that has the most success in those moments. Is Botelho going to struggle to read Karolina's blitzing attacks and get caught cold and flat-footed and lit up by Karolina when Karolina blitzes forward? Or is Karolina's striking defense so bad because she doesn't move her head and she's not particularly accurate or technical? Is Karolina's striking defense so bad that when she does blitz forward, Botelho's just going to stand her ground, plant her feet and fire back with big accurate counters that are going to hurt Karolina pretty bad? It's kind of difficult to tell from past fights because both girls have pretty bad boxing defense. Like I said, they've both primarily got a kicks-based style of striking, so it's very, very difficult to know who's going to have the edge when they both come together. What I would say is Botelho's got very much a single shot style of striking. She doesn't, you know, throw a very high volume. She doesn't really throw combinations, whereas Karolina is a little bit busier with it. So even though from a technical point of view, Karolina is a much lower level than Botelho, because of Karolina's awkwardness, she could actually make this fight a lot closer than the odds suggest. Now, when it comes to grappling, what's very interesting about both these girls is they both have the same strengths and weaknesses. So when it comes to grappling, both girls have got a predominantly Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu based style of grappling. Not a lot of wrestling there, and that is personified in their styles on the ground. Karolina and Botelho are two fighters who are reasonably heavy from top position. reasonably good submission games, but both painfully weak off their back, and they both have pretty bad takedown defense as well. So when you look at two fighters like this and you're trying to evaluate who has the advantage on the ground, the answer really is neither of them, and the person that will end up getting the better of the grappling exchanges will be the person who can get into top position first, and who that is basically a total coin flip. I say that because Karolina and Botelho are both so weak off their back that if you put them on their back, it's very, very easy to hold them down and rack up a lot of top control. So whichever one of these girls can get into top position first, if the fight does go to the ground, they're going to have a lot of success. Now, based on past performances, I guess it's a little bit more likely that Botelho will look to take Karolina down. I suppose I've not really seen Karolina try to take her opponents down, whereas Botelho did come into the Lauren Mueller fight with a grappling heavy game plan, and grappling was actually one of the main reasons why Botelho was able to win this fight against Mueller. But again, both girls are primarily strikers at the end of the day. They've both got their base in Muay Thai. Their base on the ground is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but primarily these two girls are strikers. So logic tells us very good chance we'll see a stand-up fight here. But that's all I've got for you on this one. To summarize, and the reason why this is such a difficult fight for betting for me personally, I'm going to be passing. I'm not going to be betting this fight. The reason why I'm finding this fight tricky for betting is because Luana Karolina is very bad. Very low level everywhere. So Luana Karolina is not the type of fighter that I want to bet, even at big underdog odds, because standing up and on the ground, she's not great from a technical point of view. However, I don't want to bet on Poliana Botelho either, because she's a very big favourite. It's a pretty shit risk to reward ratio if you bet Botelho. You've got to put a lot of money up to get any kind of meaningful return. And she has huge holes. She's very, very weak off her back. If the fight goes to the ground, I wouldn't feel at all confident in her ability to do well. And Karolina's stand-up game is so awkward and unorthodox that I'm not convinced Botelho is solid enough and smart enough to punish Karolina for the weaknesses that she has. So this is a classic dog or pass fight for me, where Botelho is unbettable as a big favourite because of all of the huge holes she's got that we've spoken about. But I don't want to bet on the dog either, because fundamentally Karolina's just not very good. So, it's a real tricky fight for betting this. And I would strongly recommend you guys pass. This one is not for me. I was going to show you a little bit of footage of Karolina, but the fight's from 2017. So I'm not really going to show you that because, she's only 27 years old. If I go back and show you that footage from 2017, which is, 3.5 years ago, it could cloud your judgment, because she will have improved so much over the last 3.5 years that the version of Karolina you see in that footage isn't going to give you an accurate representation of the version of Karolina you're likely to see, on Saturday night against Poliana Botelho. So anyway, let me know how you see that fight playing out. Please let me know. Leave a comment below, and let's move on to the next one. So, let's talk about the fight between Merab Dvalishvili and Cody Stamann. So, we'll start off by taking a look at the odds here. So, Merab Dvalishvili currently around about an average odds of 1.40, which is minus 250 for an implied probability of 71%. And if we take a look at the odds on Cody Stamann, currently around about an average of 3.05, which is plus 205 for an implied probability of 33%. So, when we look at the odds on Merab Dvalishvili, he is one of many big favourites on this card, which again makes this a very, very tricky fight to bet. So both these guys are primarily grapplers, We'd start off with the tail of the tape. So Dvalishvili, 30 years old, 5'6" with a 68-inch reach. Cody Stamann, 31 years old, 5'6" with a 64.5-inch reach. So a nice big 4-inch reach advantage there for Dvalishvili. However, because he is primarily a grappler, he doesn't really know how to use it when it comes to striking. When people think of reach, they instantly think of a fighter, being able to use that reach advantage when it comes to striking. But Dvalishvili is quite a sloppy striker, quite inaccurate, doesn't really know how to use that reach, and so I don't think that reach is going to benefit him too much when it comes to striking. It could, however, help him when it comes to grappling, because Cody Stamann has got that small, compact frame at 5'6". He's got that small, team alpha male style body type. And because Dvalishvili has got quite long arms for his frame, he's the same height as Cody, but with much longer arms. That will make it easier for him to control Cody in grappling positions. So, for example, it'll make it easy for him to get to that body lock position that he likes, because longer arms will make it easier for you to connect your hands around your opponent's, your opponent's body or your hips or their legs or whatever you're trying to do to them, be it a body lock or double leg takedown. So, even though Dvalishvili's reach won't really benefit him that much in strikings, he doesn't have the technical ability to use it on the ground. He certainly does. So that's one advantage for Dvalishvili. So if we look at how these guys match up from a technical point of view, both guys are primarily grapplers. Both guys have, a lot of hype behind them. Both guys are very, very high on these two fighters. And someone came into, I think it was Mikey. Mikey came into the chat room on our website earlier on, and he said he thinks that the odds are way off on this fight because both guys are grapplers and all their grappling related stats are pretty similar. And what I said to Mikey was, this is one of the areas where stats can get you into a lot of trouble. I personally think using stats to bet MMA is a very, very dangerous game, because MMA is very different from other sports. When you look at sports like football, baseball, basketball, the teams play very, very often. And on top of that, because they spend so much time in their games, their games last for over an hour, there's a lot of different repetitions that take place over and over and over and over in those games that enable you to accrue a really good sample size of good quality data. MMA is very, very different because fighters only fight maybe twice a year or 3 times per year. And they're always facing different styles. And sometimes a fight ends in round 1, sometimes a fight ends in round 3. And on top of that, fighters are on a continuous journey of self-improvement where, they're always looking to tighten up their weaknesses, and they're always looking to come into, future fights with game plans specifically tailored towards exploiting their opponent's weaknesses. So stats are mostly useless in MMA because, say for example, you're using stats to bet on, a football match, right? The Manchester City that turns up this Saturday is probably going to be not that different from the Manchester City that performed last Saturday, and so stats can be very, very useful to predict different aspects of these sports and try and give you an edge with betting. However, if you look at a guy like Dvalishvili, if you're using stats to try and predict the outcome of this matchup, those stats are going to have been if you think about it, those stats are going to be from data compiled from fights that may have taken place 2-3 years ago, back in 2017, 2018, 2019. And you look at a guy like Dvalishvili, 30 years old, training with some of the best fighters in the world, like Al Quinta, Aljamain Sterling, working with some of the best coaches in the world. He's young, he's hungry, he's ambitious. He's going to be improving at such a rapid rate that the quality of data from the stats that will have accrued earlier in his career will now be completely meaningless, because the version of Dvalishvili we have now in 2021 is even completely different from the version of Dvalishvili we probably got a year ago against Casey Kenny. Certainly completely different to the version we had against Brad Katona or Ricky Simone. So that's why stats are very, very tricky. So if there's any of you guys out there kind of looking at this from a very bird's eye view and thinking, well, Cody's a very good grappler, Dvalishvili's a very good grappler, therefore, I think this could be kind of close. I think you're barking up the wrong tree. In terms of grappling, Merab Dvalishvili has a very big advantage over Cody Stamann. this is why I much prefer, as part of my research process, just to study a lot of footage, because the footage doesn't lie. The footage shows us what is true. Stats can mislead you. You know, stats are only useful if they're interpreted correctly. And, you know, looking at grappling stats from these two guys and assuming that because the grappling stats are the same, their grappling skills are the same, is a really good example of how stats can get you into trouble by being misinterpreted. When you understand MMA grappling, if you watch a little bit of footage on Cody and watch a little bit of footage on Merab Dvalishvili, you will see there's levels to this game. And Dvalishvili's level of grappling is on a much higher level than Cody Stamann. And that is why I think Dvalishvili is a much bigger favourite here. People have understood, the bookies, when they set the line, the betting public that haven't moved the line that much since it came out, have realised that, you know, both these guys are primarily grapplers. Dvalishvili is a far superior grappler, therefore that's why he is the big favourite here, and I would certainly agree with him. Dvalishvili, you know, really should, Dvalishvili should get this done if there's a lot of grappling in this matchup. The problem with this fight is that Dvalishvili is one of these guys that doesn't always come in with the smartest game plan and strategy, doesn't always have the best fight IQ. My big issue with Dvalishvili is that at times he spends longer striking than he should. I understand why Dvalishvili does this. Dvalishvili uses a lot of striking in his fights to set up his grappling. So, you know, he'll keep the fight in kickboxing range. He'll launch a few striking blitzing attacks against his opponent to get them thinking about striking, because then that makes it easier for him to get the takedown. Because when they're focused on defending maybe a takedown or a big power punch, and he comes forward, they don't know whether they need to keep their hands up to block the power strike, keep their hands down low in anticipation of the takedown. And because of that, Dvalishvili can have a lot more success with his striking and his grappling, because when he comes forward, his opponent can't fully commit to defending a strike or a takedown. So they're kind of in this middle ground where they'll probably still eat some shots and not do a particularly good job of stuffing the takedown, because they're kind of, you know, only able to half defend both attacks that may come in. And that makes Dvalishvili a better striker and a better grappler. However, I feel, even though this is a very, very good tactic for Dvalishvili, and I completely understand why he does mix up his striking and grappling, at times he's guilty of doing a little bit too much of the striking and not enough of the grappling, which up until this point in time hasn't got him in too much trouble. But I fear as he may start to face a higher level of opponent, that could get him into trouble, because Dvalishvili quite often leaves himself in situations where he's done a lot of striking in his fights, and it's very obvious that his strategy, his tactic is going to be do a little bit of striking and then shoot a takedown, steal the round with a takedown, end the round in top position. But the danger with that style for Dvalishvili is if he doesn't win the striking part of a round and then shoots a takedown and doesn't get the takedown, it's very easy for him to drop rounds, especially because the style becomes a little bit predictable. You know, Cody Stamann's a smart guy. He's going to have done his homework on Dvalishvili. As Dvalishvili starts to face higher level opponents in the bantamweight division, they're going to start to do their homework on him, realise the tactics he's using, and so after a little bit of striking, they're going to be expecting the takedown, and that will make it easier for them to stuff it, because Dvalishvili won't have the element of surprise on his hands, and it could end up making fights and rounds closer than it needs to be. That's my biggest concern for Dvalishvili in this fight, because while I do think he has a big advantage over Cody Stamann when it comes to grappling, Stamann has a big advantage over Dvalishvili when it comes to striking. And now this is probably the point in the video where you're thinking, well, if Cody Stamann's a strong wrestler, he may not be as good of a grappler as Dvalishvili, but perhaps he can use his grappling in reverse to keep the fight standing and win a striking contest. I would completely agree with you on this front. And that's why, again, I do think this is a dog or pass matchup. I said it. Let's get into it early. It's a tricky one. It is a tricky one. The way I look at this fight is Dvalishvili is a much better grappler than Cody Stamann. He's got a much more physically imposing style of grappling. He throws a much wider range of takedowns. He's a better chain wrestler, and he's heavier from top position. And a big difference between these two is Dvalishvili does a lot more damage with his grappling control, with his ground and pound, whereas Cody you know, kind of tends to just hold on to guys. And because Cody is a lot smaller, not as physically imposing, you know, when I say a lot smaller, they're both the same height, but Dvalishvili has another level of physicality, right? So when I say Cody's smaller, I kind of mean he's not as formidable when it comes to his grappling. He doesn't have that power, that athleticism, that physicality that Dvalishvili does. But Stamann may have enough in terms of defensive wrestling to keep this fight standing. And if the fight does stay standing, I think Stamann can have a lot of success against Dvalishvili. Dvalishvili is quite sloppy, quite reckless, quite bad defensively. And Cody is making huge improvements to his striking. Every time we see Cody, his striking looks a lot better. And that's probably because he trains at Michigan Top Team, which is a predominantly striking-based gym, headed up by Darren Cruikshank, who you can see here in the background, who was obviously a UFC lightweight for a long time. Very, very high-level striker in his own right. So, this is one of those fights where I do think it's dog or pass, because I don't know if Dvalishvili is smart enough to just come in and grapple his ass off for 3 rounds. I think if Dvalishvili comes in with a grappling heavy game plan, he wins easily, because I just think he can wet blanket and smother Cody in grappling pressure, rack up a lot of control time, and, you know, win a pretty comfortable decision. My concern with Dvalishvili is if he does fuck around a little bit too much in kickboxing range and then try and steal rounds with takedowns, because Cody is such a good defensive wrestler, he may not get those takedowns and may drop rounds. Now, this is a dog or pass fight. I'm not going to be betting Dvalishvili as a big favourite for the reasons I've just explained. Again, I do think Dvalishvili will win, but it's a big price to pay. You're not getting a great risk to reward ratio betting Dvalishvili at these odds. What I would say though, I'm not really a fan of betting Cody either. Even though his odds are very tempting and he does have a path to victory, the thing that is scaring me off Cody is that he does have a tendency to slow down a lot as the fight goes on. If you go back and take a look at any of Cody Stamann's fights, cherry pick any one of them you want, even in the fights he's looked good at and won, you know, against Alejandro Perez and Brian Kelleher, go take a look at how flat Cody looks in the 3rd round of those fights. Watch the 3rd round in their entirety, and you will see that Cody slows down a lot as the fight goes on. So my concern here would be, you know, even if Dvalishvili does strike a lot in the first 2 rounds, as long as he can do enough to win one of the first 2 rounds, the probability of him winning the 3rd round is very, very, very high, because Cody is usually flat and completely ineffective in round 3. Put it this way, there's no way Cody will be able to stuff takedowns in the 3rd round. He'll be too tired, and we know that Dvalishvili is an absolute buzzsaw. He never gets tired. You know, he's just as effective in the final minute of the 3rd round as he is in the first minute of the 1st round. He did gas in his early fights against Frankie Saenz and Ricky Simone, but since then he's cleaned his gas tank up, looks absolutely phenomenal. Now he can fight at a really high pace for 15 minutes. So I do think this is dog or pass, but mainly due to the bad odds on Dvalishvili. I don't see enough from Cody to want to bet him here. So it's a dog or pass situation. I'm personally going to pass, but let me know what you think in the comments below. We now get into, oh my god, I said at the beginning of this video that it was going to be a repetitive video, and it is repetitive. It's fucking repetitive, but all we can do is play the hand we're dealt. We're now going to talk about Sean Strickland against Krzysztof Jotko, another big favourite on this card. Sean Strickland, again, one of the biggest favourites on the card, and we can see his odds have been steadily declining all week. So Strickland currently around about an average of, I would say, 1.38, which is minus 263 for an implied probability of 72%. And if we take a look at the odds on Krzysztof Jotko, he is currently around about an average of 3.15, which is plus 215 for an implied probability of 32%. So let's take a look at the tail of the tape on this one. Sean Strickland, 30 years old, 6'1", with a 76-inch reach. Jotko, 31 years old, 6'1", with a 77-inch reach. So in terms of age and body type, virtually identical. Now, What's very interesting about these two fighters is for the longest time they shared the same weakness. Both Strickland and Jotko have been plagued throughout their UFC careers by being very passive, very low volume fighters that just don't do a lot. Throughout Strickland and Jotko's entire UFC careers, their weakness has been they are a little bit gun shy, they don't pull the trigger, and they struggle to put their stamp on rounds, which is the reason why you see so many of their past fights go into decisions, and both guys have been involved in a good number of split decisions as well. You can see one here for Jotko, another here, and another here, and even a majority decision there. You look at Strickland's record, and same story, a few split decisions. He's had one there, he's had one there, and he's had one there. And like I say, Strickland, just a victim, like Jotko, of struggling to put his stamp on rounds, kind of hold him back. But Strickland recently has very much turned a corner, whereas Krzysztof Jotko hasn't. Jotko is still that passive, tentative, low-volume guy that struggles to put his stamp on rounds, whereas Sean Strickland has looked like a completely different fighter since coming back from a motorcycle accident that he had. Strickland, the new version of Strickland we're seeing, is aggressive, he fights at a high pace, he throws a high volume of strikes, works very, very hard, and is a formidable challenge to deal with. For that reason, I can see why Strickland is the big favourite here. The new version of Strickland that we've had since the terrible accident that he was in talks about bonus checks, talks about finishes, talks about going to war, talks about putting on exciting fights. And this is a completely different version of Strickland that we saw prior to that accident. The old Strickland was very tactical, very boring, but the new Strickland is exciting and very, very, very talented. You know, even against Jack Marshman, this fight that went the distance, Sean Strickland said in the post-fight interview that he was even letting Marshman hit him to try and, you know, make the fight a little bit more competitive and exciting than it was to try and, you know, get Marshman going, to try and, you know, get Marshman to open up so Strickland could finish him and get that bonus check. So Strickland has turned the corner, man. The Strickland that we have seen against Marshman and Allen has looked phenomenal, and that version of Strickland, I think, gives Krzysztof Jotko absolute hell. The fact is, you know, Jotko is a reasonably good counter striker, very, very strong offensive wrestler, talented grappler, and heavy from top position, but he just doesn't do enough of the time. Jotko's style is to just circle away from his opponent on the outside and chip away at them with range-finding strikes. Not particularly dangerous, doesn't have much power in his hands, doesn't really sit down that hard on his shots, and he just looks to kind of shoot the odd takedown here and there, you know, 1 or 2 per fight, to steal rounds with takedowns, end rounds in top control, but there's not enough grappling from him, even though he's a very high-level grappler. It's so strange to me, because Jotko is a very, very skilled fighter. If we look at his Instagram, we can also see that he trains at, you know, in my opinion, the best MMA gym in the world, American Top Team, with absolute killers and sharks. Here he is with Diego Sanchez and Dustin Poirier, and all kinds of other high-level athletes that train at ATT. This is an absolute shark tank, but for whatever reason, Jotko's just one of these guys that holds back a lot, just doesn't let it go. And for that reason, I do heavily favour Sean Strickland here. There are a lot of big favourites on this card, and I do think for the most part, most of the fights this weekend that feature big favourites are dog or pass fights. But Strickland versus Jotko is one of those fights where I actually do think Strickland deserves to be the favourite. And I actually do, out of all the fights I've researched so far, believe this guy is the safest bet. Just because Jotko's going to struggle to outstrike him because of how good of a striker Strickland is and how much volume he's brought to his last 2 fights since he's had his accident. Strickland's quite difficult to take down, quite difficult to hold down, so it's unlikely Jotko's going to be able to use his grappling to steal rounds, and I just don't think Jotko's work rate and volume is going to be enough to match Strickland's. Therefore, Strickland should be able to chip away at Jotko and win quite comfortably, I would imagine. So yeah, good fight for Strickland. He deserves to be a big favourite, and yeah, probably the safest, you know, easiest win on the card from what I've seen so far. I'm not betting him. You know, personally, I don't like to bet on fighters, you know, that are really big favourites in MMA. Just need to make that very clear. I wouldn't bet him personally, but you know, quite, you know, I'd be surprised if Jotko were to beat him, put it that way. Now let's talk about the fight between Ion Cutelaba and Dustin Jacoby. So let's take a look at the X factors first of all. So Ion Cutelaba, still very, very, very young at 27 years old. Cutelaba's been around for so long now, you know, making his UFC debut all the way back in 2016 when he was just 23 years old. So, you know, we think about Cutelaba as a guy that's been around for a while, but he's still only 27 years old, which is incredibly young for a light heavyweight. This guy has still got so much improving to do, and, you know, he's got a very, very good base of skills to work from for a guy his age. He's 6'1" with a 75-inch reach, compared to Dustin Jacoby, who's 33 years old, 6'3" with a 78-inch reach. So Jacoby will definitely have a bit of a size and reach advantage here, and you know, the only other X factor to really mention on this one, or actually there are a couple of X factors, I guess. The first X factor being that just Dustin Jacoby is stepping up to take the fight on 2 weeks' notice. Cutelaba was originally scheduled to face Devin Clark, so Jacoby not having too much time to prepare for this matchup. And the other X factor is that this is going to be Ion Cutelaba's first fight back after suffering an absolutely brutal knockout at the hands of Magomed Ankalaev. It was a very, very bad KO. Cutelaba was out, and of course it can take a long time for the body, the mind, you know, both physically and psychologically to recover from a knockout like that. Sometimes fighters never recover from knockouts like that. You know, sometimes it just dents their confidence to the point where, you know, they just lose confidence and they can't perform like they did in the past, right? Because that fear of being knocked out changes the way they fight, changes their ability to open up. And I could definitely see that happening to a guy like Cutelaba. You know, he's very, very aggressive. He's one of these guys that comes out with a lot of pressure, looking to break his opponents. But, you know, after a really bad knockout like that, it's not always easy to continue being aggressive and reckless like Cutelaba is, because, you know, the fear of getting knocked out is a very real thing. So that's a big X factor. We'll have to see how Cutelaba bounces back this week. So how do these guys match up from a stylistic point of view? Well, first of all, let's take a look at the odds. And thankfully, this is one of those matchups where, you know, it's a little bit more interesting from a betting point of view, because both these guys are in that even money odds range, instead of the, you know, us talking about all the big favourites on this card. So Ion Cutelaba currently around about an average of 1.77, which is minus 130 for an implied probability of 57%. And if we take a look at the odds on his opponent Dustin Jacoby, currently around about an average of 2.10, which is plus 110 for an implied probability of 48%. So both these guys are in the even money odds range, and as you guys know, you know, if you're a member of my community, you will know, you know, we've got that even money lab experiment, which churns out a very, very, very good profit. You will know that I love to bet fights like this, because when you've got two fighters in that even money odds range, if you can lean 60-40 one way or the other, you can often find a strong position to put your cash. And very often, if you understand MMA and you can cap a fight pretty accurately most of the time, a lot of the time you can find you know, strong positions to put your cash in this even money odds range. So this one is unfortunately one of those fights that does fall into the trickier aspect of even money betting, which is a shame. But again, this is just one of those cards that's pretty fucking difficult from a betting point of view. So how do I look at this one? Okay, I will say this. Dustin Jacoby is from a traditional kickboxing background. He's previously fought in Glory. I think he may have had 1 or 2 fights in K1 as well. If we come down here, he's fought a lot in Glory. Against some pretty high-level kickboxers as well. Carl Roberson, who we saw fight last week against Brendan Allen. Simon Marcus, who we know is an absolute nightmare. But what's very, very interesting about Dustin Jacoby is, even though he comes from a traditional kickboxing background and has competed at a pretty good level in kickboxing, his MMA striking isn't great. And I'm going to make that distinction from the beginning. I'm not saying this guy isn't a very good kickboxer. I don't know a lot about his kickboxing career. I'm sure he's a great kickboxer. But what I can tell you from his striking in MMA fights is that his striking from traditional kickboxing has not carried over that well into, MMA striking. It's just not great. This guy doesn't really have any boxing at all. He's a very, very heavy kicks-based style striker, which means he doesn't really throw many punches. This guy is all kicks. And to be honest with you, no real leg kicks, no body kicks. This guy just kind of chips away with, low calf kicks, leg kicks, choppy range-finding kicks. I'm not too impressed by this guy's striking, I'll be perfectly honest with you, to the point where, even though Ion Cutelaba has a base in grappling and he's primarily a wrestler, I would actually say Cutelaba's the better overall MMA striker. And I'm going to keep saying MMA striker, because if I know for a fact, if I say Cutelaba's a better striker than Jacoby, I get people in the comments saying, oh, but what about that amazing fucking, I don't know, fucking hook kick, fucking head kick that he landed on fucking Carl Roberson in 2006. All these kickboxing experts will come out the woodwork. What I'm trying to say is, for MMA striking, Cutelaba is a better MMA striker, just much more well-rounded, the total package, certainly a better boxer. So that's real interesting when you match these guys up from a technical point of view, because Jacoby has got that kickboxing background. He's fighting Cutelaba, who is primarily a wrestler, so you would expect Jacoby to have the advantage when it comes to striking, but I don't actually think he does, which makes this a very interesting fight, because obviously both guys in that even money odds range. Cutelaba's got the advantage standing up and on the ground, so you start to become tempted by Cutelaba, right? Which is probably why he's the favourite. Most people probably are tempted by him. On top of that, his odds are declining a little bit, I think. We just click. His odds have steadily declined, and they continue to steadily decline. But I'll tell you what my issue with this fight is, and then I'll actually show you with a little clip. My problem with this fight is, even though I think Cutelaba can outstrike Jacoby, and I think Cutelaba can take Jacoby down and cause him trouble on the ground, my big issue with Cutelaba is that he falls into the trap of starting very strong, coming out the gate very aggressive, exerting loads of energy in round 1, adrenaline dumping, and then gassing bad in round 2. This guy has a tendency to slow down bad as the fight goes on, to the point where we've never seen him look good in the second round of a fight, let alone the third round of a fight. And I personally hate to bet guys with bad gas tanks. I'm not even sure if Cutelaba does have a bad gas tank. I think it's more to do with pacing, because he just pours everything into round 1, thinking he can go out there and get his opponent out of there in round 1, and then when he doesn't get his opponent out there in round 1, he struggles in the second and third because he's put all his energy into round 1 and then he's gassed. That will be a big mistake against a guy like Jacoby, because for all of Jacoby's weaknesses, he is very, very tough and he does have a great gas tank. Now, that might not be the case on 2 weeks' notice. Perhaps Jacoby, doesn't come in the best shape this weekend because he hasn't had much time to prepare. But based on Jacoby's past fights, I don't believe this guy is going to slow down. Let me show you what I mean. We've got a clip here that I can show you from quite a while ago. It's a fight from about 2 years ago against Cody East. But the clip I'm going to show you isn't that... It's not really relevant to skills that you see in this fight. I more so want to show you Jacoby's work rate. So, first of all, one thing I will show you, look at how nice and clean this octagon is. Look at how look at how nice and crispy white this canvas is. Take a look at what Jacoby does to Cody East, and take a look at this canvas in round 3. It's absolutely disgusting. If we skip ahead to round 3, when the fight starts, or when the round starts in round 3. Here we go. So, this is the third round of this fight against Cody East, and not only has Jacoby destroyed the octagon, he's also destroyed Cody East's face. But, the point I'm trying to make, and the reason why I want to show you this clip, is this is the third round of this fight. So remember what I just said about Ion Cutelaba being one of these guys that slows down a lot as the fight goes on. Just look at how Jacoby moves in this third round. This fight has been contested at a very high pace. It's available on YouTube. Go check it out. Jacoby maintains a good output in this fight. I mean, you can see from the state on Cody East's face. Jacoby's worked hard in this fight. He's done a lot of damage. He's thrown a lot of strikes. He's worked hard. And yet, despite all this work that he's put in over the first and second round, he still looked very sharp in round 3. Still moves very well. He's still light on his feet. He's not breathing heavy. He's not gassed. And so this fight is a very difficult one from a betting point of view, because Cutelaba is better than Jacoby everywhere, in my opinion. Better MMA striker, better grappler. However, and you can kind of see it here. Look at, you know, Jacoby not looking exactly too sharp here with his boxing, right? But my issue, even though Cutelaba is better than Jacoby everywhere, my issue is it might not matter that he's better than Jacoby everywhere if he gasses after 1 round. So the problem I've got is I don't want to bet Cutelaba, because even though he's better than Jacoby everywhere, if he gasses after 1 round, there's a very high probability that Jacoby can outwork him in the 2nd and 3rd round. But I don't want to bet Jacoby either, because he's stepping up on 2 weeks' notice. He's fighting a guy in Cutelaba who's better than him everywhere. And on top of that, if Cutelaba does fight smart for once and pace himself better over 3 rounds, he could probably dominate this fight just because he's so much better than Jacoby everywhere. One positive that can come out of Cutelaba's knockout loss to Ankalaev. Remember at the beginning of the video where we said, you know, it's a big risk factor. We don't know how he's going to bounce back after that big KO. One of the potentially positive side effects that could come out of that knockout loss would be Cutelaba thinking to himself, you know what? I've been in the UFC for 4 years. I've come out the gate hard against guys like Glover and guys like Ankalaev, and it's got me into trouble. I'm a pretty good wrestler. I'm a pretty good striker. I really don't want to get knocked out again. That sucked, you know. All the dickheads on social media making fun of me. I lost my win bonus. I was in hospital for 2 days or 24 hours or whatever. I had headaches for a few weeks. The rehabilitation wasn't nice. Instead of fighting like a crazy person, I'm actually going to fight a little bit more tactically now, a little bit safer, and I'm going to try and, you know, manage my output and pace myself better over 3 rounds. And perhaps this weekend, you know, we see a different side of Cutelaba. Maybe we do see him change his style after that knockout, but not in a negative way, but where he looks tentative and gun shy and lacking in confidence. Maybe we see him fight a lot smarter and come out and give Jacoby hell. Because, you know, you've watched almost 5 minutes of footage on Jacoby here. Not that impressive, right? For a guy that has competed at a decent level in traditional kickboxing, you know, MMA striking doesn't look too sharp, right? And that's why I favour Cutelaba when it comes to striking. So that's it for that fight. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Again, it's a nasty little card for betting this, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. This is a nasty, nasty little card. A lot of big favourites, which I don't believe should be big favourites, but then I don't really want to gamble on the underdogs either, because the underdogs don't have a particularly good chance of winning. And like I say, even those even money fights, which we're usually very good at sniping, like I say, go to my website, man. Go to my website, MMABettingTips.com. Roll the mouse over betting tips. Go to lab. Check out how we've been doing with these even money bets, man. We are crushing. We are crushing. But even me, I'm struggling with a fight like that. And a fight like that is usually the kind of bet that I do very, very well on. And even I'm struggling, man. So this card, just a nasty little card. But let me know in the comments below what bets you're placing this weekend. I would love to know, because I'm personally struggling for ideas. Although I do have a bet coming up for you guys in just a moment. So, we now move on to the next fight. Let's talk about Cub Swanson against Jiri Chikadze. And we've spoken a lot this week, like I say, about these big favourites. And we do have another big favourite to talk about, but thankfully not as big of a favourite. Jiri Chikadze, currently around about an average of, I would say, there's quite a wide odd spread, but we'll go for about 1.63, which is going to be minus 159 for an implied probability of 61%. If we take a look at the odds on Cub Swanson, we can see that he is currently around about an average of 2.35, which is plus 135 for an implied probability of 43%. So roughly 60-40 in the eyes of the bookies, favouring Chikadze. And, you know, to try and find a betting opportunity, we've got to try and lean lean towards giving Chikadze more than a 65% chance of winning, or Cub more than a 45% chance of winning, to find any value here. So how do these guys match up from a stylistic point of view? Well, let's first of all talk about the X factors, because I guess the X factors are quite a big deal in this matchup. Jiri Chikadze, 32 years old, 6 foot tall with a 74-inch reach. Cub Swanson, 37 years old, 5'8", with a 70-inch reach. So Chikadze's got all the X factors on his side. He's 5 years younger than Cub, but both these guys are in that stage of their career where that 5 years is a real big deal, because Jiri Chikadze at 32 years old is just in his prime, whereas Cub Swanson at 37 years old is now at this stage of his career where you'd be expecting him to decline significantly from fight to fight. We know that at the age of 33, the male body starts to produce, on average, there will always be outliers and people are different, but on average, when the male body hits the age of 33, starts to produce significantly lower levels of testosterone every single year thereafter. And so the older a fighter gets, the further away from the age of 33 they get, the more you'll see them decline, because testosterone's a big deal. You think about a lot of performance enhancing drugs the fighters take. Most of the performance enhancing drugs, their goal is to boost testosterone levels. Testosterone is the lifeblood of the male body. Testosterone gives you energy, gives you drive, makes you more aggressive. These are all things that help a fighter train and help a fighter to perform the best of their ability in the octagon. So when you have lower levels of testosterone, it's not a good thing. And obviously a 32-year-old fighter is going to have a lot more testosterone, generally speaking, than a 37-year-old fighter. This is a big deal. Cub Swanson at 37 years old, likely to be declining a lot from fight to fight. And when we think about the things that decline in a fighter as they get older, the major things to go first are things like speed and reflexes, which were a big deal his whole career. This is why in the lighter weight classes it's a lot less forgiving as you get older. If you look at the heavyweight division, you look at the light heavyweight division, a lot of the top fighters in these divisions are older. Jan Blachowicz, Stipe Miocic, Daniel Cormier, these guys that have been at the top of their game in these heavier weight classes, they can do well for longer. They can have a longer career at the top of the division, because the higher weight classes don't rely so much on speed, reflexes and movement. It's more about power and intelligence, right? But if you think about the lower weight classes, it's very much about speed, and that's why you don't see many fighters over the age of 36, 35, 36 in the top 10 of the flyweight division or the bantamweight division or the featherweight division or even the lightweight division. So whenever you see a featherweight light club 37 years old, it's struggle city, and straight away we should be expecting them to start to struggle significantly from fight to fight. It's always something we need to consider in situations like this. This is a young man's sport, and Conor McGregor's analogy, in the jungle there are lots of gorillas, and there will be a king gorilla, and the king gorilla will fuck up every other gorilla that ever tries to take his crown, until one day a young, hungry gorilla comes along that is faster, more powerful, stronger. He'll come along, rip that gorilla's face off, rip King Gorilla's face off, take everything he's ever worked for. And that's unfortunately a cycle that we see repeat over and over and over and over again in MMA. There are no happy endings. That's why this is struggle city for Cub. So as well as having the age advantage in this matchup, Jiri Chikadze's also got the size advantage. 6 foot tall, 74-inch reach, which means when these two guys face off on Friday, I would expect Jiri to tower over Cub. He's going to have a massive size advantage. And on top of that, Jiri's a guy that knows how to use his reach. He's got a very good jab, and he uses his length very, very well with his kicks. But when it comes to striking, both these guys have got very, very different styles of striking. Cub Swanson likes to stand in the pocket, use his footwork, head movement, and his ability to roll with the punches, to stand right in front of you in a phone booth and throw a very, very high volume of strikes. The difference between these two fighters is Cub likes to overload you with information and wear you down with volume. He throws an extremely high volume of strikes, whereas Jiri Chikadze, much more of a sniper, single shot fighter. So while Swanson is trying to drown his opponent with wave after wave after wave after wave of blitzing attack, which features a high volume of strikes, Jiri is trying to put a hole in your head with a single shot. The guy's like a sniper. Completely different styles. And this makes this for... those two styles make for a very, very interesting stand-up contest. It's a real big clash of styles, this. Because Chikadze can't match the volume that Swanson puts up. Chikadze does have a tendency to slow down as the fight goes on. And he won't be able to match Cub's volume. So what's very interesting about this matchup is Cub is going to come forward, put a lot of pressure and volume on Chikadze, and force Chikadze to exchange. Chikadze is not going to be able to keep up with that volume. However, at 37 years old, Cub's not as sharp as he used to be. He's not as elusive as he used to be. Cub is a guy that likes to fight with his hands low and rely on his ability to read his opponent, to just roll with the punches, use head movement to slip shots. That's Cub's style of getting inside and outworking you. But like we said, at 37 years old, Cub's not as sharp as he used to be. If you go and watch his fight against Daniel Pineda and compare that to his fight against Shane Burgos, you'll see that Cub actually looks like a different human being. There's a 2-year or 18-month age gap between those two fights. But you go and check out how much of a difference there is in Cub's appearance in just 18 months. And of course, he had that really significant knee injury that he suffered against Jake Shields in Quintet. So that's probably taken a lot out of Cub as well. But if you go and look at the Burgos-Pineda fights, trust me, you'll see a noticeable difference in Cub Swanson's appearance, which does indicate he's on quite a steep decline. So when you look at how these guys match up from a stylistic point of view when it comes to striking, with both these guys being strikers, you'd expect there to be a lot of striking in this matchup. It's kind of difficult to call because you've got the volume of Cub, but he's not as good defensively to evade Jigger's power strikes as he used to be. And on top of that, at 37 years old, he's had almost 40 pro fights. He's been in tons of wars. You wouldn't expect Cub to be able to take a shot like he used to be able to. So this is a really, really interesting matchup because I don't believe Jigger can match Cub's volume. Even at this stage in Cub's career, I don't think Jigger can match his volume. I think if the fight goes the distance, there's a very high probability that Swanson can outwork Chikadze and win a decision. However, Chikadze does big damage. Big single shot power. Very, very accurate. And it's one of those fights where it is power versus volume here. And I'm finding it pretty difficult with this one. I'm not going to be betting this fight myself, just because I see how Cub's style could cause Jigger a problem because of how much Jigger slows down and because of how low a volume of strikes he throws. However, Jigger is a sniper. He's very accurate. He's very dangerous. And I don't feel great about betting on a 37-year-old striker on a decline that relies on speed, movement, athleticism, reflexes against a guy who has all those, you know, all those attributes, but much fresher is what I'm trying to say. I don't want to bet on a guy like Cub at this stage in his career against the young, hungry bull who is also a striker, if that makes sense. So in terms of grappling, it is interesting. Jigger is a very, very high level. Jigger is a very, very low level on the ground. Weak off his back. Not the best takedown defense. Cub Swanson is a very, very high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Problem with Cub is he's one of these stubborn strikers that never really tries to take his opponent down. Cub's got a phenomenal gas tank, even at this stage in his career. If Cub came into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, I think he could do really well. I think he could take Jigger down, wear him down, you know, rack up a lot of points on the ground. I'm not saying Cub would have a particularly good amount of success holding Jigger down. Even though Jigger's weak off his back, it won't be easy for a small fighter that's 5'8" to hold down a big guy that's 6 foot tall. You know, it just isn't going to be that easy, especially with Cub not being a natural wrestler. But Cub is a much higher level on the ground, and if Cub does come in with a grappling heavy game plan, that could accelerate the rate at which Jigger slows down, making it easier for Cub to have success standing, because Jigger will be flatter standing, won't have as much power, as much pop in his shots to hurt Cub, and also won't be able to keep up as easily with the volume that Cub's gonna throw out there. But I've got to cover that, but it is unlikely that that happens because Cub never tries to take his opponents down. So I'm going to pass on this fight. I don't even know who I lean towards, to be honest. I guess, I don't know. Probably dog or pass again, but do you want to bet on a 37-year-old fighter that relies on a lot of the stuff that usually declines pretty fast when you get old? It's up to you guys. It's up to you. But I'm going to be passing on this one. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We now get into the main event of the evening. Dominic Reyes against Jiri Prochazka. And this is a horrible card for betting. I will not lie to you. We've got a few bets on the website for sure. Check them out. MMABettingTips.com. Link in the description below. But this is a horrible card for betting. But I am going to recommend a bet on this fight. Very, very similar bet to our bet last week on Rose. Very, very similar logic. And you don't always win those bets. But remember, betting on MMA fights is not always so much about being right. It's not always so much about betting on who is more likely to win. It is more about putting your money in strong positions and looking for bets with a good risk to reward ratio. And I believe there is a good bet here with a good risk to reward ratio. So let's take a look at the odds. Dominic Reyes, currently the underdog at average odds of about 2.10, which is plus 110 for an implied probability of 48%. And if we take a look at the odds on Jiri Prochazka, currently around about an average of, I would say, 1.77, which is minus 130 for an implied probability of 57%. Now, I am noticing a trend on MMA, guys, and I love it because I'm making a lot of money from it. But I have noticed a trend where hype, UFC hype machine, and win-loss records are having a massive influence on the odds. Wiki capping is running rampant right now. I don't know if that's because the UFC is growing and there's way more people betting the sport that don't really understand the sport. I don't know if it's because these, the gambling content that the UFC are producing now, like the UFC on the Line show with the Greek guy, is kind of misleading people and influencing them to bet in stupid ways. I don't know if it's all these other predictions channels, UFC cappers that have appeared on YouTube that are really shit, to be honest with you, and really just the level of their breakdown is, Dominic Reyes is on a 2-fight losing streak, Jiri Prochazka's on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Jiri Prochazka's on an 11-fight winning streak. He looked amazing. He looked so powerful. He looked so scary. He was a great knockout against Volkan. Dominic Reyes has lost his last 2. Therefore, I think Jiri's going to win. That's about the level of breakdown most people put out. So, I don't know what the fuck is going on right now in MMA, but I am noticing a situation where wiki capping is having a huge influence on the odds. And it's amazing for guys like me because we can profit from that. And there's an amazing opportunity here. I have absolutely no fucking idea why Dominic Reyes is the underdog. No idea. Absolutely no idea. And this is the stage in the video where people will probably go into the comments and tell me the same stuff they told me last week about Weili Zhang and say stuff like, but Jiri's so powerful, he's so dangerous, he said this in an interview, such and such coach said that, a guy on this YouTube channel said that, this fighter said that he trained with Jiri and he saw Jiri reach into some guy's arm, pull his heart out of his chest while it was still pumping, swallow it, shit it out, put it back in the guy's chest, and the guy actually survived because Jiri's also an amazing surgeon. He was able to stitch him up. Therefore, Reyes has got no chance. It's just fucking crazy, man. I'm not complaining, but wiki capping and hype right now is having such a big influence on the odds on some of these fights. And quite frankly, it's batshit crazy. I've spent 2 hours researching the fight between Jiri and Reyes. I watched a ton of footage on both these guys, and there is no reason on the fucking universe that Jiri should be the favourite here. Absolutely no reason. Reyes should be the favourite. Indisputably. If you understand MMA, Reyes should be the favourite. So I do think Reyes is a good bet this weekend. However, all of the stuff that people say about Jiri being powerful, Jiri being dangerous, Jiri being a big threat to Reyes, all of that's true. You know, like we were talking about with Rose and Zhang last week, when we look at fights like this, it's important not to set up camp. It's important not to be in that camp of people that go, Jiri is powerful, Jiri is dangerous, you know, Jiri is Jiri's on an 11-fight win streak. You know, he's going to come out there and kill Reyes. He's going to knock him out in round 1. Reyes hasn't got a chance. You really don't want to be that guy. Do not be a donkey dickhead. That person's a donkey dickhead. They don't understand gambling. They don't understand MMA. You also don't want to be in the camp of people that go, Jiri hasn't fought anyone. He got lucky against Ozdemir. He was reckless, sloppy, didn't look very good. And, you know, Reyes has fought for a title twice. You know, he probably beat John Jones by decision, in my opinion. It was a terrible decision. I think Reyes won 3 rounds to 2. Therefore, Jiri hasn't got a chance. You don't want to be that guy either. That's a biased donkey dickhead that is only going to lose money long term. You don't want to put yourself in either camp. What you want to do is consider both sides of the argument, right? Both those sets of statements are true and can be true, and they can coexist. The thing about MMA is we don't know what's going to happen. It's our job to research a fight, consider all possible outcomes, all likely outcomes, then assign probabilities to each of those outcomes. Then we consider the odds, look at the implied probability on the odds, and we consider if there's a good, you know, if there's a strong position for us to put our money. Are we getting a good risk to reward on each of these fighters? Let's use Zhang and Rose as an example last week. I made the point last week, but it's a lot easier to make it now, seeing how that fight played out. You could have bet Rose at odds of 2.70, or you could have bet Weili Zhang at odds of 1.53. What that means is you could have bet $100 on Zhang and won 53 had Zhang won, or you could have bet $100 on Rose and got 170 back. So 53 or 170. That means in order for you to get value betting on Zhang, Zhang should have had almost no way to lose that fight in order for you to get a good risk to reward ratio. But remember, there were two very different sets of opinion on that fight. There was the opinion that Zhang was overrated, that she was bad defensively, that her gas tank was a little bit sketchy, that she didn't have very, very good fight IQ, and that she was going to struggle very bad against Rose. There was the other camp, of course, there was the other camp that would say, you know, Zhang was way too powerful for Rose. She hit way too hard. Rose was too inconsistent. And because of Zhang's power and toughness and grit and determination, Rose wouldn't be able to deal with her. Both of those camps were right. Both people were correct. No matter what you thought, whether you thought Zhang was overrated or you thought she was, you know, the next fucking GOAT. Whichever camp you sat in could both have been right. But the difference is, if this camp turned out to be right, you wouldn't want to be betting on Zhang at 1.53. The possibility of this camp being right, the possibility that Zhang was bad defensively, was overrated, did have a sketchy gas tank, meant that in a situation where you can bet $100 on either fighter and win 53 on Zhang or 170 on Namajunas, you have to go with Namajunas. I don't care if you're Zhang's brother, boyfriend, mum or dad. Do not be a donkey dickhead and do not be biased. Bet the fucking money on Rose. That was the only side you should have been on. And it doesn't matter if Zhang would have gone out and fucking wheel kicked Rose in the face and KO'd her in 3 seconds. It doesn't matter. Rose was the right side to be on. And if you bet Zhang last week, it was a bad bet. We have the same sort of situation happening here with Reyes and Prochazka. Exactly the same kind of bet. It's not the same odds. However, it's also not the same fight, because I do feel with the amount of footage available on both these guys, we have a much better idea of what we're going to get from both these fighters this weekend. So there's no fucking way Reyes should be the underdog here. You've got to bet Reyes. It's as simple as that. I'm not saying Reyes will win, because, like I said, Jiri is very dangerous, he's very powerful, he can hurt Reyes very bad. But the risk-to-reward ratio on Reyes this week is great. It's absolutely great. You've got to lean at least 60-40 in favour of Reyes here, which makes him a very good bet at his current odds. Let me explain why. You know what? It is kind of difficult to explain this one without being able to show you the first round of Jiri's last fight against Volkan Oezdemir. Again, shameless plug, I would urge you to join our community, MMABettingTips.com. Go check it out. There's a much more detailed video on there which will do a much better job of explaining to you the reasons why Reyes is such a good bet here. I can't show you that content on YouTube. You know, I just can't. I can't show you clips of stuff because the YouTube copyright algorithm is very, very aggressive. But if you go to the website, you'll see you see a pretty in-depth video on this fight. Okay, I'll do my best to talk you through it, and I'll do my best to show you a little clip to explain it. Jiri Prochazka has a very impressive record at 27-3. He's 28 years old. He's a young, hungry bull. He's absolutely massive, 6'4" with an 80-inch reach. But Prochazka's record is very padded. There's a lot of weaknesses that Reyes can exploit here. And I'm trying to basically think of the best way to drive this home to you without being able to show you this third round. Okay, this first round. What I will say is, you can turn this breakdown off right now and not have to listen to another word I say. Just go and watch round 1 of Oezdemir Jiri, and I guarantee after watching round 1 of Oezdemir versus Jiri, you will run out and bet Dominic Reyes at underdog odds. Jiri looked so low level in that first round, it was staggering. Very, very sloppy. No striking defense. Didn't read Oezdemir at all, and every single time Oezdemir let his hands go, he landed. The thing with Oezdemir is he's a very slow, heavy-set fighter. We know Oezdemir is one of these guys who's very powerful, but one of the reasons why he's powerful is he's got like that heavyweight style where he's very slow and cumbersome, slow, heavy hand speed, right? When you get outstruck by a guy like Oezdemir, it's a really bad fucking sign. Because Oezdemir is slow. And he's quite traditional. If you think about Oezdemir, hand speed slow. Straight away. Very, very slow. So if you're getting outstruck and caught by a guy as slow as Oezdemir, straight away that's a red flag. Second red flag, Oezdemir is not exactly a difficult fighter to read. Very, very traditional kickboxing style. Comes forward in the orthodox stance, throws the odd leg kick, very, very traditional boxing style. It's not like you're fighting Johnny Walker or John Jones or Jiri Prochazka for that matter, who can come at you with all kinds of crazy shit. They're a lot more difficult to read. Volkan Oezdemir is a very meat and potatoes striker. So if you're getting outstruck by a guy like that, if you're getting caught clean and cold and can't read a dude like that, you're probably not a very good striker. Go and watch round 1 of Oezdemir against Jiri. Jiri cannot read Oezdemir, has no idea what he's going to do, to the point where when Oezdemir comes forward and attacks, if Oezdemir throws a leg kick, Jiri reacts like a fucking hook is coming, and if Oezdemir throws a leg kick, sorry, if Oezdemir throws a right hook, Jiri reacts to Oezdemir coming forward by, you know, going to check a leg kick or something and gets punched clean in the face. The guy's striking defense is very, very, very bad. Very bad. And that's a huge issue when you're going up against someone like Dominic Reyes, because Reyes can punish you for making mistakes that someone like Oezdemir can't. We only saw 6 minutes of Jiri in his UFC debut, but that 6 minutes told us a lot about this guy. Forget about him running through overblown middleweights, you know, and facing low-level guys and rising to pad his record out. When we actually saw Jiri against a high-level guy, one of the best light heavyweights in the world, Volkan Oezdemir, he didn't look good. And this is why wiki capping gets you into a lot of trouble. This is why win-loss records don't tell the whole story. If you look at Wikipedia, you can look at a win over Volkan Oezdemir and go, do you know what? This Jiri guy must be really good. You know, Volkan's fought for a title. He's one of the best light heavyweights in the world. You know, for Jiri to knock that guy out in 6 minutes, Jiri's got to be legit. Jiri's got to be better than Vulcan. This is how wiki capping will get you into trouble. Go watch that first round. Striking defense, absolute garbage. And that's a huge issue when you go up against someone like Dominic Reyes, because this guy poses a completely different set of threats than Oezdemir. Reyes is a sniper, ruthlessly accurate, fast twitch counters, big power in his hands, but the power comes from his speed. They say the punches that knock you out, the punches that drop you, are the ones you don't see coming. And that's what makes Reyes so dangerous. So much more dangerous to Jiri than Oezdemir. Because the thing is, when Jiri's coming forward, flailing his arms around with all this flim-flam, with his hands down low, chin up high, and he's not reading his opponent. When Oezdemir lets his hands go, it's a meat and potato style of striking where Jiri still, you know, kind of knows where those shots are coming from. So when he's coming forward recklessly, he is getting tagged by Oezdemir, but he can somewhat get away with it because Oezdemir is not fast enough to just, you know, punish him for those defensive weaknesses in a split second and catch Jiri with shit he just doesn't see coming. Reyes, on the other hand, has that sniper style of striking where if you make one mistake against this guy, he can put you to sleep. He can punish you very bad. He's devastatingly accurate. You know, earlier in Dominic Reyes' career, before he started facing a higher level of opponent in the UFC's light heavyweight division, this guy was a wrecking machine, KO machine. Go back, look at some of Reyes' KOs. The guy is pretty fucking nasty. And so when you look at Jiri, this guy's striking defense is so bad, and now he's going up against the guy that can truly punish him for that. The first guy in a long time that can punish him for that. And I think there's a very good chance Reyes knocks him out this weekend. Let me show you a little bit of what I mean. So I'm going to show you a clip of Jiri Prochazka fighting King Mo. Remember, King Mo's a wrestler, doesn't really have any striking. So this is from the third round. This is from the third round. Now, a lot of people's, a lot of the narrative behind Jiri this week in the MMA media, you know, on the MMA pundit desk this weekend, they'll be talking about it. I'm sure a lot of other people on YouTube are going to be talking about the power of Jiri, how dangerous he is standing, how he's going to be a nightmare for Reyes and all this shit. The beautiful thing about studying footage is it cuts out all the bullshit and it shows you what is true. This is the third round of the Jiri versus King Mo fight. This has been a stand-up fight, and if you're familiar with King Mo, you're familiar with MMA, you know King Mo's not particularly good defensively, doesn't have a particularly good chin, and is not particularly difficult to hit. In a stand-up fight, you would have expected Jiri to fucking murder King Mo and probably knock him out in round 1 if he was that dangerous. But we're now in round 3, and take a look at how average Jiri looks here in round 3. Look at this. King Mo is a sitting duck stood right in front of him. And Jiri is kind of coming with his flim-flam, chipping away at King Mo. King Mo's not exactly elusive. It's not exactly hard to hit King Mo. He stood right in front of you behind the high boxing guard. King Mo doesn't have any power in his hands. He's a pure wrestler. So it's not like Jiri needs to worry about eating big counters or anything like that. And yet, look at how ineffective Jiri is here. Of course he's got to worry about the threat of the takedown. You know, you see him sprawling out of a few takedowns there. But King Mo's like 40 years old. Very tired here. Doesn't have the energy to drive through and take this guy down. And yet Jiri just doesn't look that dangerous. Look at how heavy King Mo's breathing here. Big deep breaths. Jiri is stood right in front of him. And he's not really doing any damage. Chipping away with jabs, hooks. Not at all accurate. This is something we saw in the Oezdemir fight. I know he knocked Oezdemir out, but painfully inaccurate. You know, little sequences like this. Throwing hooks and King Mo just reading him and ducking under and getting out the way. Look at this. There's nothing on these hooks. Jiri looking quite flat. Just chipping away at King Mo. But King Mo not really in any danger here. He's in danger because he's exhausted. He's not in danger because Jiri's particularly powerful or dangerous. So this is why doing fight research is so... I mean, look at how sloppy Jiri looks here. This is why fight research is so important. Because this weekend, thanks to the wiki cappers and the UFC hype machine, we've got an opportunity to bet on Dominic Reyes, a guy that's fought for a title twice, a guy that has been fucking murdering dudes earlier on in his career, which is what put him into the position of getting a title shot against John Jones in the first place. You know, Dominic Reyes is a sniper, very well rounded, actually has a base in wrestling, came up training under Joe Daddy Stevenson, who's, you know, a predominantly grappling based coach. You know, shout out to Brett for letting us know this. Brett from the community that told us that Dominic Reyes was actually a state champion high school wrestler in California. You know, does Jiri look dangerous to you here? And this is just the third round. This is the third round of a 5-round title fight. This fight was only 2 years ago. Does Jiri look dangerous? And we saw the same shit last week. We spent time watching Weili Zhang. We saw she wasn't great. We saw Weili Zhang wasn't great. Got exposed against Rose, and we're seeing the same thing here. Jiri's average. He's an average dude. And yet Dominic Reyes has fought for a UFC title twice. Ruthlessly accurate striker. Devastating knockout power. Good defensively. Good footwork. Good movement. Much better grappler than Jiri, should he choose to use his grappling. So this is a situation where Dominic Reyes is the underdog, and he's better than Jiri everywhere. Do you see what I'm saying? You've got an opportunity here to bet the underdog in a fight where he's better than his opponent everywhere. Now, that doesn't mean Dominic will win. That's not what I'm saying. This is not about being the smartest guy in the bar. This is not about being right or wrong. This is about finding strong positions to put your money, and it's about finding bets that have got a good risk to reward ratio. The implied probability on Reyes is 47%. If you can give Reyes a better than 47% chance of winning, you are finding value. He's better than Jiri everywhere. You have to give him a better than 47% chance of winning. These odds are massively inaccurate. At worst, I think it's fair to cap Reyes at 60% here. At absolute fucking worst. Which means, win or lose, you're getting a great risk to reward ratio. I don't care if Jiri comes out and catches Reyes in a flying triangle in the first 30 seconds. The only bet here is Dominic Reyes. That's the right side to be on. Now, there is one risk factor that I don't like, though. There is one. Well, obviously, there's more than one risk factor. We talked about a few, right? Jiri, big, strong, heavy-handed dude that's very aggressive. There are more than one risk factors. The other risk factor is that this is Dominic Reyes' first fight back after taking a lot of damage against Jan Blachowicz. Now, I will say this knockout wasn't that bad in terms of the shots that Blachowicz landed and put Reyes away from weren't really anything. They were kind of nothing burgers. They didn't really inflict damage. Reyes wasn't that hurt. As soon as the ref called the fight, Reyes stood back up. He was fine. So it wasn't a bad knockout. It wasn't like earlier in the video where we were talking about, you know, this being Cutelaba's first fight back since suffering a bad knockout against Ankalaev, right? That knockout was bad. Cutelaba was out. That was a bad knockout. This one wasn't. However, this one was bad because Reyes took tons of damage in that fight with the broken nose. The nose break was absolutely savage. And to be honest with you, I think that's kind of what the stoppage came from. I think Reyes was so hurt from that nose, that, you know, the damage of the nose, the broken nose, that he couldn't recover. And that's why he kind of got stopped with volume from Jan. We don't know how Reyes is going to come back and recover from that nose injury. We were talking about this last week with Rose. We said that it was a huge risk factor to Rose. How would Rose come back after suffering that significant nose injury, you know, from the Jessica Andrade fight? And it's significant because we've seen fighters like Mike Perry and Rory McDonald decline hard after their nose, you know, a bad nose break. We've never seen Perry look the same since breaking his nose against Vicente Luque, and Rory McDonald was never the same again, you know, after breaking his nose against Robbie Lawler. It's a big risk factor. We don't know how Reyes will bounce back. Some guys bounce back like it's nothing. They're absolutely fine and they look better than ever. But, you know, it was a bad nose break, and that rehabilitation for Reyes would have been painful. It would have been, you know, absolutely savage. It would have been a grueling rehabilitation. We don't know how much that broken nose would have psychologically affected Reyes. And so perhaps Reyes comes in against Jiri, and again, like all the stuff we talked about with Cutelaba, maybe he looks like, you know, low in confidence, you know, gun shy, reluctant to open up. Very tentative, passive, because he's lost his confidence, because he doesn't want to suffer another, you know, another nasty nose break, another injury like that. That can definitely happen. And that you know, that kind of gets talked about a little bit here in this clip that I'm going to play for you. So just listen to this little clip here of Dominic Reyes talking about his fight against Jan Blachowicz, and see what you think.
Going into the Jan fight, I just wasn't happy. COVID already is in full effect. My dad is extremely sick. He has COVID. He's on oxygen. But I knew I couldn't see him. So I'm in camp. I can't see my mom or my dad. Suddenly, not confident in who I am anymore. I started doubting my skill set. I started doubting all the work I've done. I doubted whether I was who I proved I was all those years in the UFC. Like, am I really that dude? I went into that fight. I wasn't nice to anyone around me. I was just not happy with the person I was. I was like, all right, well, if I get this belt, everything will be, you know, right. Everything will be fine. It'll be validated. Everything will be good. And I was just fighting for that. I was fighting for the belt. I wasn't fighting for me. Man, it was so weak. It was so weak of me. It was. And I was fighting for all the wrong reasons. I wasn't fighting for the love I have for the sport. I wasn't fighting for myself and my family. I was fighting for other people I don't even know. No, man, I learned those lessons, and I got back to it. I got back to remembering who I am and what I'm about. It was back to enjoying every day and every little moment, and realizing that you don't live forever. Do the most with the time you have. I gotta tell you, man, it feels amazing. It feels amazing to be me. But in order to get to the light, you gotta go to the dark sometimes.
So I do really like what I've heard from Dominic Reyes there. Dominic Reyes had a pretty easy fight against Jan Blachowicz. Let's be real, from a stylistic point of view, Reyes had a very good chance of beating Jan Blachowicz, which is why Reyes was a 1.36 favourite in that fight. And for whatever reason, Reyes just didn't show up. Didn't show up and perform to his full potential. The version of Reyes that we got against Blachowicz was not the same version of Reyes that we got against John Jones. Just a completely different guy. And now we've heard Reyes talk about, you know, his dad getting sick with COVID and lacking motivation as being, you know, one of the key reasons why Reyes didn't show up and perform to his full potential against Blachowicz. But that is a red flag. Even though in that video Reyes says that, you know, he learned his lesson, you know, in the Blachowicz fight, and he's got his hunger and his motivation back now, and, you know, he's got that drive to compete and that drive to go out there and become a champion again. It's great that he said all that stuff, and it's, you know, it's great to hear that. However, when you hear fighters talk like this, it does add additional risk when you bet them, because it does indicate that they may be a little bit inconsistent. And I think at times we've seen Reyes go out, put in an amazing performance and look absolutely incredible, but at times it's almost like he holds back a little bit and doesn't fight to his full potential. I think Reyes is definitely a bit inconsistent, which is another risk factor here. You know, if Reyes was more consistent, you know, if we were confident that Reyes was going to come out and fight like he did against John Jones in every single one of his fights, man, I'd go huge on Reyes this week. I'd cap Reyes at like 70%, because I would simply give Jiri a puncher's chance. But with that inconsistency from Reyes, does make it a little bit more of a gamble to bet on him. And we were talking about this with Rose last week, right? Rose is also a fighter that's very inconsistent. So I'm not going to be going huge on Reyes this week. But it's a very good value bet. Got to lean at least 60-40 in favour of Reyes here, which means there's a good risk to reward ratio on his odds. So I hope you found that useful, guys. Really appreciate you watching. Thank you very, very, very much. And yeah, that's going to be it for this week. Let me know in the comments below what you think. I'm sure there will be plenty of you that will still tell me that Reyes has got zero chance of winning because Jiri is, some powerful some powerful god that Reyes doesn't stand a chance against. There will be a lot of you out there. But let me know what you think about this fight below. If you think I've missed anything out, I know you guys are great for dropping knowledge and giving really good details on these matchups that I sometimes am completely unaware of. So I really appreciate you guys that drop, good valuable knowledge in the comments. And don't forget, guys, hit that like button. If this video gets 200 likes, we will do that prop bet live stream on Saturday. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out MMABettingTips.com. And until Saturday, hopefully, have a great week. I'll see you guys soon. Nice one for watching, guys. Love you, boys. Take care. Bye.